I'm James Shillinglaw for Virtual Roadshows, selling adventure and expedition travel. And I'm here today with really a guy who's I cruised with. I had an incredible cruise with him, and I respect him so much. He's done amazing things in adventure cruising. He doesn't even call it a cruise, he calls it uncruise. So it's Captain Dan Blanchard, who's the CEO and founder of Uncruise Adventures. We're going to talk to Dan about what his product is, but we'll also talk to him about what adventure travel and adventure cruising really is today. And you're going to find out about all that and more as we talk to him as we go forward on this. First of all, Dan, great to see you. It's been a while. Well, we talk about virtual. We haven't seen each other for a while. We keep talking about doing a cruise again, and I always refer to your cruise that we did in Alaska as one of my favorite cruises because it was just such a wonderful. You were on board. That was in a good reason, and I had such a wonderful time, and we've been trying to get that together again. But let's talk a little bit about Uncruise Adventures. Can you remind us a bit about your company? When did you start it, and how many ships do you have now?
Well, first of all, James, thanks for having me. It's really good to be here with you again, and we will get out on a cruise
Okay.
again. Yeah, the Uncruise Adventures started in 1996, an Alaska corporation based out of Juneau, and the whole idea was to, take this idea of small ship cruising that we've had in the United States for a while and really meet the needs of the burgeoning adventure travel market,
Mhm.
and which is I'm a part of as a person. I travel in that manner anyway. So it was kind of the one of the early agents we had on board. She she said, this is kind of like you're kind of the antithesis of the big cruise lines. You're kind of
Mhm.
like, remember back when there was Seven Up, the Uncola,
Yeah.
and she goes, you guys are kind of like the uncruise
Oh,
of
okay.
cruising. And
Yeah.
she said, you're the antithesis. So that's the first time we heard the name was on board from a wonderful woman named Gigi Ragland, who was the first one to utter those words.
That's amazing. So that out of that came Uncruise. And how many ships do you have now?
We have 8 ships that we own and another one that we charter in the Galapagos. So we have most of those ships travel in Alaska during the summer and then in different destinations, Mexico, Hawaii, Galapagos, Costa Rica, et cetera, during the winter.
No, that's great. And talk a little bit about that, where you sail. I know I experienced Alaska, and that's kind of one of the things you're famous for. If anybody doesn't know, Dan is kind of the mayor of Juneau, but that's we won't talk about that. Gives a great. If you have a chance to get a tour of Juneau with Dan, do it because it's everybody knows Dan. It's like that's it. And little to know, you actually you sing in front of the state capitol of the flag song, which it was one of the highlights of my cruise. That was a great time, but that was even before we got on the ship. That was it. But you sail Alaska and you do a lot of different itineraries up there, but you also go other places, right?
Yeah, so in Alaska, we do Southeast Alaska. We do the Inside Passage from Seattle, Prince William Sound, Aleutian Islands, and of course Denali by land. But then outside of Alaska, we of course do the Inside Passage to Seattle. We also do Hawaii seasonally.
Right.
Uh, yeah, and Gulf of Mexico, excuse me, Gulf of California,
Right.
inside Sea of Cortez. We have 2 different routes we run down there at 10 and at 7. And then we're back in Costa Rica now. We're real happy about that.
Great.
In fact, our new Costa Rica itinerary, it's kind of unique. They're allowing vessels our size to be imported, so we don't have to travel to Nicaragua or Panama. We're going to have our first time ever a full week just inside Costa Rica. And then, of course, the Galapagos. And, what we've done in the post-pandemic world is we've kind of focused on our bread and butter homes. And so we're slowly starting to reach out to some of those other destinations. So we're looking forward to getting back to Costa Rica in 2026.
Yeah, well, Costa Rica should be amazing. I've been there once in the past and really loved it. And I actually have cruised the Sea of Cortez, but when I cruised on it, I cruised on the oldest cruise ship in the world, the Aurora, which had been the Stockholm.
Oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
know that whole story.
Yeah, you know the whole story, but we'll have to save that for a beer. But that was
Okay.
an amazing cruise, and I didn't even know why I was going to see a Cortez, except it was the ship in part. And it just last word on that one. The Aurora or whatever, which was the Stockholm, was the ship that sank the Andrea Doria in 1958, 57. I can't remember, 56 maybe. It was around the time I was born, so I wasn't around. But it was an amazing story, and that was we had shipboard historians, Peter Canego, if you know him.
Yeah.
He was actually a lecturer. So anyway, enough about that because that was my experience with Sea. I'm sure Sea of Cortez with you is a different experience.
Well, it is. It's, like all our stuff, it's very much adventure slash expedition travel. And so it's a very active, lots of, chances to get in the water with whale sharks and sea lions and, do hikes and all our kind of standard keep the body moving type things.
No, absolutely. Now, we already talked about how you came up with the uncruise name, like the Uncola. But here we are talking about exped, and I kind of differentiated exploration, expedition. I was trying to get away from just doing polar and doing expedition. Do you consider yourself an exploration cruise company, an adventure company, an expedition company, or maybe all of the above?
Well, I think it is a little bit of semantics because
Okay.
each one of those words have different similarities. But for us, our basis is more on the adventure travel side. So even in Alaska, if you were looking at our competitors that consider themselves expedition or exploration travel, we are at the further end of being getting people ashore and actually hiking in Glacier Bay. And we overnight our boat and anchor in Glacier Bay. And
Right.
so it's a much more of an experience where I like to describe it's like taking that backcountry lodge that you may have visited sometime in your life and putting on the hull of a boat. And it just moves every night to a new wonderful location. You're not at the same lodge mountain every day. You're at a new mountain every day. And so that's kind of the emphasis behind Uncruise is going to these different destinations within a destination and really exploring. And as you can see in the picture in behind you, kayaking if it's calm or whale
Yeah.
watching or whatever, moving to the activities of nature.
Yeah, no, and I had some tremendous activities. What's the hiking thing we did up at going up the I always forget the name, but we're going up with no trails and you're yelling.
Bushwhacking.
Yeah, thank you, bushwhacking, because you're yelling to scare away the bears. That was another highlight. Aside from you putting seaweed on my hair and putting seaweed on John's hair, John Roberts. Uh,
Yeah.
that was a fun time. Now, let's talk a little bit about who is Uncruise for? What kind of guests are going to be happy? If you're a travel advisor who's talking to your clients, who is happiest on your ships?
Well, I'll give you the simple part first, which is kind of the demographic. I mean, primarily North Americans, primarily super well traveled. They tend to start at about age 45, which is the minimal age where most people have the money, and go right up into I think the oldest we've ever had in a kayak is 97,
Hmm.
and that was wonderful. But it's that's kind of the demographic. They tend to be folks that have moved out of their big house and because they want to travel more, they have a condo or a place at a club or whatever. But they're the kind of person, James, that maybe post college or in college during a break, they went to Europe on $25 a day.
Hmm.
They were likely to take their kids or their kids' kids to national parks as part of their family bonding. They're the type that you would hear say, "You stop moving, you're dead." In other words,
Which was true, but that,
which is true. And but they're the kind that likely walk 3, 4, 5 miles a day, and even if they're retired.
Mhm.
But they tend to bring along their families a lot, so we get a lot of extended families on board. But I think that the biggest thing is that they really rely on experiential travel. They would not be the type that necessarily would choose a super large cruise ship or a super large lodge. a Sheraton hotel or whatever.
Right, right.
They're going to go more boutique all the time.
Now, uh, how do your itineraries, and we talked a little bit about this, how do your itineraries really differ for some of your larger cruise companies?
Well, I think Alaska is probably a good example of that. So, and you have to kind of put the big ships, and then I'm going to say foreign, just because in the United States they are. So the foreign flagships in one bucket over here, and the U.S. flagships of uncruise in a different bucket, because of the rules of the sea. We're allowed to both arrive and depart from a port in Alaska. So we work right out of our
Right.
office in Juneau, as you know.
Yep.
And we go from Juneau to Sitka, or Sitka back to Juneau, or Juneau to Ketchikan, or in Prince William Sound, we go from Seward back to Seward, or we go to the Dutch Harbor from Seward and back. So what happens is, instead of traveling open ocean, which most cruise ships do these days, from Seattle or Vancouver, burning a day and a half each direction, or 3 days a trip, that's just nothing but steaming. You're actually in the destination 100% of the time.
Right.
So it does give you more efficiency of travel dollar, from a sense of 100% of that time being in the destination. So that's one advantage of a U.S. flag vessel like ourselves. And of course, we have Alaskans and Americans guiding you through,
Right, right.
which is a big benefit as well.
Well, everybody says they do Glacier Bay, but I don't think people do Glacier Bay exactly like you guys do. It's you are getting really deep into the different inlets and fjords, and you're sending your kayaks really out places. I remember that was one. Remember, went out kayaking for a day, and coming back, it started to rain a bit, and the guy who was in front, it was nobody I knew, was my partner, and he decided didn't want to paddle anymore. And so I'm paddling like crazy, and I'm saying I paddling like this. I look up, oh, the ship is still far away, and I'm paddling again, and oh my God! But it was fun. It was
Was
fun.
that me in the front?
It wasn't you. No, believe me, if it was you, we'd have some words now, because I'd be hitting you with the paddle or something. But that
Uh,
was, I don't know, some guy who was just solo, I guess, and he was. And I mean, I was with journalists. That was a big press cruise, but he was not a journalist. He was just one of the other guests who I paired up with. But it would have been easier just to have by myself, to be honest with you. But that's okay. Sometimes that happens. You can't. But yeah, and then the different other activities were great. Now let's talk a little bit about what happens during your one of your cruises. What does the crew do for the guests? What should travel advisors tell their clients about it?
Well, I think the one big advantage is you are with Alaskan or an American crew on board, so the cultural differences are nil, and so that gives you the opportunity to completely communicate freely, to understand the service ethics ethos that we have in the United States, that kind of thing. So that presents a definite benefit for the guest. The other thing is, because these folks are all trained on the area or from the very area, a lot of times there's stories about, oh, when I was a kid, my dad took me over here and Dan's taking us there today, or whatever.
Right.
And so you hear a lot of that, but I think that, for instance, with our steward staff on a small ship of, under 100 people, our stewards are, making your plates and setting that all up. But before that, they did your rooms. And, you've got the executive chef is the one that comes out and actually shares what's happening on the next day, meals, and the pastry chef comes out and brings all his or her wonderful treats, and you meet them. And so there are galley tours and all this kind of thing. So you have some of the makings of kind of traditional cruising in one sense, but you're also going to see those crew members out with you on activities. They just
Yeah.
love to get out. So what happens is you end up with a really, big bond because of the interaction between the guest and the crew. And I like to say to the crew that, our measure of success is when the guests get off the boat and I see them leaving and you're all lined up. And if there aren't, tears or emotions on their faces and hugs happening, we haven't done our job.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because it's really I think it's an opportunity in this kind of small group travel to really build relationships that are going to last a lifetime. A lot of our past guests actually meet people on board and then travel with them someplace
Okay.
else or with us again.
Yeah, that's a great repeat business for you. And then you mentioned the dining. I found I was not expecting the dining to be as good as it is. And yes, you are sort of given the menu every morning of what you're going to be eating, but it's good stuff. And it's a good choice. And as you said, the pastries are awesome. And that was one of the biggest surprises that I found on that cruise, that your food was so good.
Well, one of the nice things about, again, being a small business, small vessels, is that, for instance, all our greens come from a place called Juneau Greens that grow the greens inside a big warehouse. So they're fresh, they're healthy, they're natural. And, of course, we get all our seafood from fishermen that we know and get it on the boat
Yeah,
fresh
because there's
from.
no seafood in Alaska at all. I don't know where.
Yeah, no, no
Unless I
seafood there.
imported, fly it in, right?
But like in Mexico, where I was just at not too long ago, we actually have a farmer that has a farm about 20 miles from us that's been farming for us about 15 years now. And he
Really?
has an organic farm and he grows just for uncruise and he, basically plans all his crops around the time of year that we're going to be there. So, having that access, we have a similar relationship in Hawaii on the island of Molokai where they grow all our vegetables as well.
Well, it's interesting that that trend has been heating up for a few years now with sustainability and go local, food sourced locally, farm to table, if you will, all that kind of thing. Sounds like you've been doing that for a while.
Yeah, we have, and it's really been a great thing for us and the communities we work with. You should see it someday when we load up in Costa Rica. The farm trucks come right to the boat. They've got big plastic totes, the reusable kind that are just filled with oranges and everything else, and it's a wonderful thing. It's not even coming out of a cardboard box.
Oh, well, that's excellent. I love that. Now, what about the accommodations? Tell us a little bit about what you offer in the range.
It ranges quite a bit from very small, 100 square feet, kind of traditional expedition style cabins, on up to, I think our largest suite is around 650 feet. So it does range quite a bit, but the majority are all sitting around 120, 125 feet, private, facilities and all that kind of thing. But what you find is that guests oftentimes come to us their first time and they buy the best cabins on the boat. So
Right.
say that there's 30 cabins on a boat, the top 12 or so are all higher end cabins, right? And so they'll buy those. Then the next time they come, they buy the cheapest cabins. And we kept wondering why.
Yeah.
And what they find is that they're just not in their cabins.
Yeah, well, they're in the common rooms, your living area, the lounges. That's where people stay, and obviously dining. So
And on activities.
and
Yeah.
activities, out kayaking and do whatever they're going to do. So the cabin is not the center of attention. It's not like I'm just going to sit in my cabin and look out and never experience anything.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a different type of uncruising, you might say.
There you go. Now, how has adventure travel changed in your view since you started in the business? Have there been changes?
I think the perception of what an adventure travel has definitely changed. I mean, as you know, that sector of travel grew exponentially prior to the pandemic and is still growing, but now at about the same rate as the rest of travel.
Mhm.
But, there were years when it was up 30% for multiple years in a row per year. And what it was, back in the 80s and 90s, when we first started studying the idea of doing this, people's minds were that adventure travel meant putting on crampons and roping up and, let's go kill a mountain. And today's definition of adventure travel is different. I like to talk about, back in the day when I was hauling World War II vets around,
Yeah.
their idea of adventure was to stand up on the bow of the boat in front of a glacier with a glass of cognac and a cigar and see this beautiful glacier. And my generation came along and we kind of want to go touch that glacier and maybe
Right,
feel
right.
cold off of it. And so adventure travel has changed. But I think the good thing is it's actually broadened It's expanded rather than contracted in its meaning, and that has been beneficial. So I think whether you call it adventure travel or experiential travel, those weave very tightly together.
Absolutely. That's a good explanation for what's going on today. Um, and then, of course, I'm going to give you an opportunity to tell our travel advisors. Overall, we go to 128,000 of them. For this show, it's really targeted to those who are more apt to sell adventure and expedition travel. So, what do you want to tell them about Uncruise and about adventure travel today?
Well, I will say that the travel industry, the retail travel industry, has been a huge part of our success since 1996. And I think the reason that is one, we're obviously with a lot of consortia and this kind of thing, but the really great thing for travel advisors is that this is a full inclusive package. So, if you have the right client, which you need to have, I mean, you can't just send anybody on this trip just because you want to screen them. Are they right for this kind of active adventure and fun? Whether they
Right.
just choose to sit in the hot tub and hop in a skiff, or whether they want to go climb a mountain, they can kind of do it all. But the important thing is to understand, and the big advantage for the travel advisor is that everything's included, which means that a $10,000 per person trip, they get the full commission
Full
on that
commission.
$10,000, and we're not selling things on board that they're not getting commissions on. And so I think from a kind of a honesty and ethics kind of viewpoint, we're the travel advisor's best friend.
No, and I think if they book your product, they're going to have some repeat business too, because it is a very different kind of cruising. It is an uncruise that we keep talking about, but it is really a very special thing. Now, what are the resources that you have for travel advisors to help them sell more of your exploration cruises, your adventure cruises, your website, any training materials? Where can they learn much more about what we've been talking about?
Well, of course, you're correct. The website uncruise.com, and that's just uncruise.com. And but really beyond that, we have an adventurous program, we call it, where if people can get certified in Uncruise, which gives them extra funds, commissions, and this type of thing, and opportunities that come up when maybe we have a low sailing, they can reach out to a guest and they can get a special deal for them or something like this. So we have a full agent program within the company, but then also particularly for agents that are part of consortias. We've always been very big on consortias, and in fact, I just finished a long adventure talk with one today that
Oh,
I
wow.
won't mention the name. You and I both know him quite well,
Okay.
but we find that the consortiums are a really great way for us to educate guests, as well as just like the time you and I are having right now,
Yeah.
and getting in front of the travel industry and sharing that, hey, we're a small American business just like you, and we pay U.S. taxes and with unemployment and Social Security and all the things that an American business pays. So I think that's something to think about when you're booking a cruise product as well.
Well, Dan, thank you for spending the time today with us. Always enjoy talking with you and finding out what's going on with On Cruise. We had a marvelous time in that cruise. I'm looking forward to doing another one, as we said, very soon. And so, just to remind everyone that you actually can go down on the virtual floor, and there is an Uncruise booth, and you can find out even more information there. And if it all doesn't work, just go call up Dan, and he'll tell you what's up. But that's the way to. But again, thank you for spending the time with us, and I look forward to our next cruise.
Absolutely, James. It's been a pleasure and look forward to it.
I'm James Shillinglaw for Virtual Roadshows, Selling Adventure and Expedition Travel.